Welcome to the John Norquist segment of Healing Communities by Removing Highways, a Zoom conference held February 22nd, 2024. This conference is hosted by Constance Struther, East Side Preservation Specialist with Preservation Buffalo Niagara, in association with the East Side Parkways Coalition.
The highlight of our event is John Norquist, a former mayor from Milwaukee who oversaw the removal of the Park East Freeway in Milwaukee. And so, John, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we'll help you share your screen, and we'll get right into the meat of it. Thank you.
Okay.
There we go.
All right. So this is a boulevard that's not in Buffalo. This is in Boston, Commonwealth Avenue, and it's greatly loved. People love to walk along it. People come from other neighborhoods just to be on it. And it's very successful. But Buffalo actually has more boulevards than Boston, as far as I can tell. But it's kind of a rival on Olmsted creations. So you have the green crescent of parks in Boston, and you have all the parks that are connected by boulevards in Buffalo. At least some of them are connected. The ones that depended on the Humboldt Boulevard, of course, are not as connected now. But anyway, this is the Bidwell Parkway that's in the Elmwood neighborhood. I put it up here just because it has the trees and it has everything you'd want on a boulevard. And it's typical of what Olmsted intended. And this is, I believe, part of the Humboldt Parkway before it was ripped up for the Kensington. Now it could be it's from the 198, which I haven't taken enough pronunciation lessons on the actual name of it, but the 198. And this is what happened to that boulevard. They tore down the trees. This was the beginning of the end of the Humboldt Parkway by taking the trees, and then you end up with a freeway. And what did the freeway do? Well, freeways in cities, which they don't belong in cities, in a lot of European cities, there aren't any freeways. They had one freeway in Paris called the Route Pompidou, and it's gone now. So they don't have any freeways inside the outer ring around the city. And there's no freeways in Vancouver, BC, and all of the places that don't have any freeways at all are doing great. Even the suburbs around those cities are doing great for the most part. If you have a healthy city, you get healthier suburbs. If you want suburbs with lower incomes and lower success, be near a city that's very unsuccessful, and then you'll see that. If you have a wealthy city like New York City, the suburbs tend to be doing pretty well too. And so everybody benefits from having a lot of money around if it's distributed right. But one of the things that the freeways do is they skew the wealth in ways that I don't think the freeway builders intended it, but well, maybe some of them did, like maybe Robert Moses, I don't know. But the outcome was disastrous for cities. They pushed the retail sheds way out into the hinterland. They degraded the retail in the city. Downtown Milwaukee used to be by far the #1 retail center in the state of Wisconsin. The Black community, which was north of the downtown on 3rd Street, which is now called MLK Drive, had the 5th biggest retail center. After the freeways were built, not even downtown was in the top 10 of retail centers. It had offices, it had lots of other good things, but not retail. So anyway, this is the Kensington. And this is a story from a different city, New Orleans. This is in Treme, the Claiborne Avenue. And it was a place where upper middle class, largely African Americans lived, very successful people like Louis Armstrong lived on Claiborne Avenue. And then they decided they'd take this beautiful avenue that had over 1,000 live oak trees on the about 3 miles of its distance. And they tore all the trees down and then put up a freeway. So there it is, the Claiborne Expressway. And the avenue disappeared. It had like 200 businesses on it before the freeway, and then it had 29 businesses the last time I checked with the freeway on it. But things move slow in the Big Easy. So there's a lot of debate going on. The neighborhood's becoming more and more for tearing down the freeway, but there were arguments that are made that might be familiar to people in Buffalo too, like, well, if we make the neighborhood better by tearing down the freeway, then we won't be able to live here anymore. So we have to keep the neighborhood, we have to keep the freeway to keep the real estate prices down. I can tell you right now, that's not a good strategy. That if a neighborhood's getting more prosperous, people that have challenging lives and incomes actually strive to stay in those neighborhoods, and statistics show that they're more likely to want to stay in a neighborhood that's getting better, and they'll strive to do it, than if a neighborhood's going to hell. If a neighborhood's going down, everybody leaves or tries to. And so owning real estate that nobody else wants to live on isn't a really good strategy. It's better to build the neighborhood better. You can also work on things like equity strategies that help to keep the real estate prices reasonable. Anyway, the people in New Orleans want to have this instead. Just put it back the way it was. You don't try to convert the freeway into something else. You don't turn it into an artistic trophy and leave it up or anything like that. Just make it like it was. Leave it with put the trees back, grow back the trees, make it better. Another success story was the Embarcadero. The Embarcadero was finished in 1957. You can see when it was brand new and people were driving on it. It put up a wall between San Francisco and the bay, so they couldn't see it unless you were on one of the tall buildings or up on the hill. And that's the tower, the ferry tower where the boats come in, and they built it so it blocked it. And the earthquake knocked down part of it. And after a big fight in the community and 3 referenda, they finally took it down and restored it, including the streetcar line that was on the boulevard before the freeway was built. This is what I really wanted to get into a little bit more here is the Central Freeway, which runs west from downtown toward a neighborhood called Hayes Valley. And it was damaged a little bit by the earthquake, but mostly people had been fighting it and they never forgot they were fighting it. And so even 30 years later, they wanted to take it down. It went right through the heart of the neighborhood. It was a relatively modest neighborhood in terms of who lived in it. It was a mix of immigrants, African Americans, and whites, working class kind of neighborhood. And this was the early picture way back in 1950 when they were trying to organize against it. They lost. It was built, but they stopped it from being built all the way to the Golden Gate Bridge. And they won. And so the Hayes Valley section was torn down about a mile long. And this is the connection between the end of the freeway. You can see it in the upper right-hand corner. And they put in a boulevard, a multi-way boulevard with lots of trees, Dr. Roberts, lots of trees. And this is what a multi-way boulevard looks like. It's got two traffic lanes in each direction, and then a slip lane on the side with parking, sidewalks, more tree. And it works really well for almost any purpose you want, including at rush hour. You can actually move better on a street like this than you can on a congested freeway. Here's a way it looks further along where the road narrows a bit. This is coming down right off the freeway. All right, now the good news about this is that people are so happy. They're so happy that the freeway came down in that section that now they want the whole freeway torn all the way back to I-90. I mean to I-80, sorry. All the way back as far as it goes. And they've already taken preliminary action to make that happen at the city council. They support it. And so when you're dealing with the freeway in Buffalo, one of the great things about it, and maybe the only great thing about it, is that it doesn't go anywhere. Once it gets downtown, it goes into Oak Street and Elm Street. And so it's what we call a freeway stub, just like in Milwaukee. The Park East was stubbed. And it's easier to win a fight to tear down a freeway when it's not a through freeway, although it's been done, when it's not carrying quite as much traffic, and it's you can roll it back. So people can already envision with the Kensington, it comes down at Oak and Elm, and then it runs at grade level. So they already know that it can not be there because it's not there on Oak and Elm. And so you can roll it back, you know, like the Cold War people used to talk about rolling back communism. You know, you can roll back the freeway. I'm more against freeways than I would. Well, I was in the Army, so I was against communism by definition. But I guess, anyway, the freeway can be rolled back to Martin Luther King Park and to where the 198 and 33 come together. And you can deal with the 198 and finally get that plan. Cuomo said that Mario, not Mario, the son, said that the, I'm going to try Saskatchewan. That's close. Anyway, that is very, very beautiful, and that it was replaced by something that was very ugly, and that he committed himself to do something about it, and then he wasn't in office, and he had that committee and took it away from DOT, and now that's stalled out. Well, hopefully that'll come back to life, and you should put pressure on your elected officials. There's no reason to have that freeway running through the middle of that park. All right, now back to the Kensington. So what needs to happen is the green corridor that is the Humboldt Parkway needs to be created between the downtown and all the way up to where 33 joins with 198. And the model for that is the Central Freeway in San Francisco, the Park East in Milwaukee, and some other ones that I'm going to show you real quick here because I know you want to keep on schedule. And this is the final thing on this is what it looks like where it used to be a freeway. Look at that. It's like a street that's been there for a long time. And the trees are even bigger now because this picture is about 5 years old. All right, now the most dramatic one ever is the 160,000 cars a day that ran through Seoul on the Chechong Freeway, double deck over the Chechong River, which was covered with concrete, just like the creek that's underneath the Humboldt, what's left of Humboldt with the Kensington Expressway. And so they had built the river of the Chechong. Somebody that was pretty important lived in that part of Seoul, where the river was. And when they built the freeway, he was disappointed. He didn't like it. And that was Lee Myung-bak, who got elected mayor. First, he was head of Hyundai Construction, which is the biggest construction company in Korea. So he was a big guy. But he wanted that freeway gone. It ruined the neighborhood that he had lived in. So when he became mayor, a few years later, that freeway was gone. I mean, lickety split quick. So if one of you wants to run for mayor next time and have the power that a mayor has, maybe that would help resolve these issues. Anyway, they took out the freeway and replaced it, recreated the river, put the river back in place, and have a street on each side of the river that has two moving lanes and a parking lane. And that's it, to replace a 160,000 car road. Now, the New York DOT would just freak out. What do you do with the traffic? Well, the traffic is in the street grid. The street grid of Seoul is a rich street grid with all kinds of avenues and streets. It has before the freeways, they had what we call a low profile of road. I'll talk more about that later, but they have boulevards, they have avenues, they have diagonals, they have blocks. They have all kinds of ways to get around without a freeway. And they just rediscovered that stuff. Congestion was less because what the freeway does is it concentrates the traffic and creates congestion at the nodes. And whereas the grid is complex and it's like a wetland, it absorbs the traffic instead of concentrating it. You know how Liz Cheney talks about how Trump concentrated the mob. The highway planning in the United States concentrates the congestion. Both mobs and congestions are bad things. Although I don't really think congestion is necessarily bad. There's good congestion and bad congestion. All right, and this is more shots of this beautiful thing. It's now the biggest tourist attraction in South Korea. In fact, it's the biggest tourist attraction in all of Korea, including North Korea, because there are no tourist attractions in North Korea. I don't know if I mean, at least that you and I can go to, unless you want to stay there for the rest of your life. Okay, now this is Lee Myung-bak. He is one happy guy. He did what he believed in. He did it quickly. He won. He changed the city, and Seoul is so beautiful as a result. All right, this is Dietrich Bryce, and I just bring this up to give you homework. You can all look it up. Bryce's paradox. Dietrich Bryce is a German mathematician. He came up with a math model that shows, and it's widely accepted, particularly in Germany, that if you build a freeway in an urban setting, that you actually generate more congestion, you generate more discomfort, all the things you don't want, and travel times get longer. Now, it's counterintuitive, so it's hard to believe, but it's actually true. And Seoul, Korea is a good example. With what happened with Seoul, Korea, the travel times for the majority of trips got shorter after the freeway was removed. And the same thing happened with the Embarcadero in San Francisco. The majority of travel times got faster. And the same thing happened with the Central Artery. And the same thing happened in Milwaukee with the Park East, is that the freeway creates more problems than it solves. And so you need to get rid of the freeway, putting a cap on top of it for $1 billion, which that comes out to $100 million for every 1/10 of a mile. Is that right? Something like that. It's outrageous. And you guys are the experts on the bad side effects from it, but at best, it's a waste of money. That's how bad it is. Now, the problem is a lot of your friends in politics and so forth think they're doing the right thing. like the Senator Gillibrand and other people think that this, or Buttigieg, the Secretary of Treasury, he thinks this is somehow solving the problem that Dr. Roberts was talking about. It doesn't do that at all. In order to do that, you need to reconnect the street grid. You need to allow the street grid to exist. You notice how, like, Elmwood is, I've been to Buffalo a number of times. Elmwood is sort of the picturesque neighborhood street. Well, it didn't get degraded by having a freeway right next to it, and it's a healthy neighborhood, and they have what they need. They have all the things you'd want on a main street. And that's also true of 125th Street in Harlem, that they have all the shops and everything else you need. It isn't just a race issue, it's a common sense issue. If you have freeways, it's going to degrade the neighborhoods near them. All right. We have here is a wetland. So this is, if you look at a wetland, it absorbs it absorbs water. It slows down any chance of flooding. And that's what the street grid does. And you know, you've seen channelized streams, which was a big deal back in the 50s and 60s, 70s. The federal government actually paid aid to people to channelize streams and cause flooding. It was the dumbest thing in the world. You had to have a box of rocks for a brain to want to do this. And so one of the things I did as mayor, I controlled the sewage district. I had the majority of the votes on it, is we started getting rid of these things and putting in recreating wetlands and vegetation along them. But they're sort of the equivalent of freeways in terms of water instead of traffic. It's the same principle. They create more problems than they solve. And they're expensive. They're a total waste of money, which you can try to get, you know, even people that live in East Aurora, people that live, you know, far away from Buffalo, they'll understand frugalness. They'll understand common sense. This isn't just an issue of them having to think of even sacrificing anything. They're going to be better off if the freeway is turned into a parkway again. Okay. All right. So here's what I was talking about. This is the local roads. You can see as the hatch, you know, the hatch of streets looks like a tic-tac-toe thing. This is what the Wisconsin DOT created to show what they think should happen. So they have the freeway, which is the big thing, the most important thing, then the service road, the arterial road, the collector road, and then off to the side is the street grid, which they don't give a crap about. All they look at is long trips. If somebody lives across the street from where their employer is, they don't see any value at that at all. But if somebody lives 40 miles away and commutes, they want to figure out how to speed up that trip. And they think that leads to economic development. All it does is redistribute where people are. It just pushes the drive sheds further and further away, which isn't efficient. It's energy inefficient. It undermines energy productivity. It does all kinds of bad stuff. Okay, so what about if we built more freeways? If we widen them, couldn't we solve our traffic problems? Well, this is the Katy Expressway in Houston. It's 26 lanes. And it was 24 lanes until 2008 when they made it 2018 when they made it 26 lanes. And 3 years later, there's 30% more congestion. If you add lanes, it's like loosening your belt to solve obesity. It doesn't do anything good, it just makes it worse. You're assembling the traffic. You're bringing it all together and creating a mess and spending billions and billions of dollars to do it. It's insane. Okay. And this is a different expressway. It's not quite as big as the Katy, but this is a scene from Hurricane Katy. back in 2008. And what happened was the warnings went out and everybody was supposed to hop on the freeway and get out of town. Instead, people hopped on the freeway and it was total gridlock. A bus burned and a bunch of senior citizens died. It was really tragic. 58 people were killed one way or another in the evacuation on the Katy. Now, these freeways were built as defense highways. It was to defend the American flag and the American way of life, to build these highways and to defend against a Soviet missile launch with an ICBM full of nukes with H-bombs. And so the theory is that people would hop on these, they'd get the warning, the missiles have been launched from Kamchatka, they're coming over the Arctic Circle, they're coming down, and they'll be in Houston in 47 minutes. So jump in your car, head out to safety, out in this far out suburb somewhere, and then the bomb hits. But the problem with that is what happened with Hurricane Katy. It doesn't even work for that. I mean, they had to reduce themselves to making the excuse for building more and more freeways in the cities was to evacuate the cities. It didn't even work for that. All right, this is the street grid in Washington, D.C., designed by Pierre L'Enfant. He's not an African-American, he was a Franco-African. He was from France, an architect, and he designed the low hierarchy that I was talking about of roads, which is exactly what Washington, D.C. has: boulevards, avenues, streets, alleys, sidewalks, as opposed to freeways, collector roads, all the things that you see in suburbia. And they did try to ruin it. They didn't have it called the DOT then, but the highway department wanted to build a crisscross of freeways through the middle of the street grid of Washington, D.C. And this was a battle that was won by African Americans largely, although they had a coalition of people from like the Chevy Chase neighborhood on the Northwest side, wealthier people that were environmentalists, joined in with the group that was fighting it, who were largely African American. And they fought for 12 some years there was some Congressman Natcher from Kentucky who wanted to build all these freeways in Washington, but they won. And if you go to Washington, D.C., everybody likes to say there's so many problems in Washington, D.C. Well, one of them isn't freeways. There's some. There's Anacostia has a horrible freeway in it. And there's a little stub of freeway that comes across in the Georgetown neighborhood. But the bulk of the city is left alone. And as a result, it's been able to renew and revitalize over and over with stronger and stronger economy. And it's a city that has its biggest problem is that the Congress tries to run it instead of letting the people who live there run it. And it ought to be a state, and it ought to have 2 senators. It has more people than 4 states, and yet they're not allowed to vote. That might be part of the reason for that might be best explained by Dr. Roberts, because it has something to do with the same thing she was just talking about. All right, and this is a picture from Milwaukee, not far from where we tore down the Park East. This is Brady Street. And I was talking about congestion, and there's good congestion. Cities are congested with people, businesses, interesting activities, art, music. What it doesn't need is a lot of car congestion, but it has culture, all the things you want come together in the city and create really wonderful things. And we need to have the roads, the street structure, we support that, add value to it, not ruin it. And that's why we don't need freeways anymore in cities. And Buttigieg knows this, and the president knows this. but they don't always pick the right, especially if they're dealing with local people they think are their friends, they don't always pick the right solution. And capping this freeway instead of getting rid of it is one of those things. We need the Humboldt Parkway back. Buffalo needs the parkway back. They need the trees. They need all of the things that go with it. Restore what happened before, and it'll probably cost a lot less than the $1 billion cap that they want to put over that. That $1 billion cap isn't to help the neighborhood. That's so the DOT can figure out a way to still concentrate the traffic, to assemble the traffic and create the mess that they've created. They still believe in it. And it's really unfortunate. We need to retool some of these engineering programs so the highway engineers understand that in the cities, the streets have a purpose other than just moving traffic. It's where you sell things, where you communicate with your friends, you have social relationships, you walk along a street or a boulevard and fall in love with somebody. Those are things that happen in cities, not just cars. And so with that, that's my book. If you ever want it, you can buy it, or you can just go to the library and you don't have to pay anything. And I won't care one way or the other. I'm happy the way I am. So, okay. I'm happy to answer any questions.